Hi, and welcome to our panel on how can museum shops embrace e-commerce around innovation and getting people back into our nation's cultural institutions post-pandemic. I'm Professor James Bennett. I am the director of StoryFutures, which I'll talk a little more about in a moment, but I want to introduce our panelists first. They're all going to introduce themselves. I'm going to hand over to Anna from Smartify.
Hi everyone, I'm Anna Lowe. I'm the Director of Partnerships and also co-founder of Smartify, which is the world's most downloaded museum app. Niki?
Yes. Hi everybody, I'm Niki Panteli. I'm a Professor of Digital Business at Royal Holloway, University of London.
Hi, my name is Philip Wu. I'm a Senior Lecturer in Technology Information Management, also at Royal Holloway, University of London.
Thanks, everyone. So I'm just going to give a little bit of context first about what StoryFutures is and how the Smartify project about e-commerce at the museum shop fits into it, and then hand over to Anna to talk more about that context. And how we're going to run the session today is a little bit of context about the project at the start, and then we're going to have a kind of chaired discussion from our research team and Anna at Smartify. But we'll welcome questions in the chat, which I'll take as we go along and try and integrate those into our conversation. So in 1 minute, StoryFutures is a research and development collaboration between universities and creative industries in the UK that's been funded as part of the UK government's investment in industrial challenge strategy. The aim is to create creative industries growth by allowing creative industries access to R&D funding and research support by tackling real-world challenges fueled by academic research. So the collaboration with Smartify and the National Gallery came about from previous work with StoryFutures had done with the National Gallery and a scheme that we run called the Graduate Fellowship Scheme that's about propelling new entrants into the creative industries with a research agenda to join creative industries and enable those to tackle real-world challenges. There are plenty of real-world challenges in a post-COVID landscape, and when we heard about Smartify's challenge of working with the National Gallery to help them reopen and find a way to embrace e-commerce at the gallery to ensure that the gallery could not only just reopen, but also ensure that they could do so in a way that was, ensuring revenue back to the gallery. So we've collaborated with our business school at Royal Holloway, University of London, and Smartify to create a graduate fellowship scheme that enables Smartify to draw on our research, employ a new person into the industry, and hopefully find a way to start to solve these challenges. I'm going to hand over to Anna now to talk a bit about the size of those challenges and how we're tackling them on this project.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just going to share my screen actually so that I can have some reference material. So give me 1 second. I hope you can all see that there. I hope it's not too small either, but I'll kind of talk through it. So, okay, what is Smartify then? Well, Smartify, as I mentioned before, is the world's most downloaded museum app. And what we established and what we aim to do is to basically create a tool that easily integrates with the existing museum services to deliver a consistent and seamless kind of tool for visitors, both before, during, and after a physical visit to a museum. So what that looks like in practice is an app that functions across Android, iOS, and also as a web app, which allows you to basically just hold up your phone in front of any object or artwork. So you can see this video here. Hold up your phone and it will instantly scan and identify the object or artwork in front of you. It will then pull from the museum database the information, so the video, audio content, audio guides, podcasts, whatever you have available, and make that then immediately available for the visitor. You can also do that before the visit or after. What we found during the pandemic is that that obviously, all the museums were closed. So immediately we wanted to make all of the audio guides in Smartify free to audiences. We also promoted a demo of our software to museums globally to allow them to basically just create tours and make information available. And particularly thinking about museums reopening, museums are very keen, obviously, to move away from rented audio guides and devices that you kind of have to share and actually offer something on people's own devices, which would just be on their own smartphone. The scanning technology that I just showed you would allow them to just scan an artwork and get that information on their phone rather than having to kind of lean in towards other people or hold pieces of paper. So it was a very useful tool for museums to kind of reopen. And this led to a growth in the platform as well. So over the past 6 months, we've been working with some really big new customers like the Belvedere Palace in Vienna, or the National Galleries of Scotland, or the British Museum, who have all been using Smartify to kind of offer guides as they start to reopen. So just to go back to this project specifically then, one of the key things our partners were telling us was that basically, you know, with less people on site, it was more important than ever to make sure that people were visiting and engaging with the shop, and they wanted to introduce an e-shop feature. So the context of this study, as I mentioned, was reduced footfall and also the need to maintain hygiene in the museum. So the project that we developed with StoryFutures Academy was to look at whether we could deliver a really simple mobile e-commerce platform so that when people are scanning objects or artworks in a museum, they're also prompted to engage with artwork with related museum merchandise and purchase that either through a click and collect, so then going to the shop, or through an e-commerce kind of walkthrough platform. So I'll just kind of show these slides here to give you a sense of what we're building. And then I'll move over and invite Niki and Philip to talk a little bit more about the research that they've been doing in terms of how interactive experiences can support the museum with eShop and also, you know, improve the visitor experience.
Thanks, Anna. So yeah, I'll bring Niki into the conversation here, and Niki, you can maybe talk about, you know, the research from thinking it through from a museum's perspective about what type of benefits they're trying to realise through a project like this in bringing in interactive and immersive in a kind of COVID landscape.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks, thanks, James. So as part of the project we carried out at Royal Holloway, we examine museums' experiences with immersive technologies in our attempt to understand the opportunities for digital innovation post-COVID. So we've looked at a number of studies where immersive technologies have been used in cultural institutions around the world. And we've also looked at the potentials of what Smartify has been proposing. So one of the main benefits is that with interactive and immersive applications, museums offer new experiences to their visitors. And these experiences involved increased engagement, fulfillment, so higher levels of satisfaction among their visitors, as well as learning opportunities to visitors across different age groups. And another benefit is that in the post-COVID era, with the introduction of these applications, museums can present an image of not just being innovative, but also adaptive. And I think this is hugely important in the currents of climate and the challenges that we are all sort of experiencing. So therefore, the mobile commerce, for example, the mobile sort of model that Smartify app has been it's planning to incorporate, will afford more accessibility, more flexibility in the way people shop online, and this is expected to increase visitors' confidence on museums' post-COVID operation and will encourage them to visit more regularly. And ultimately, of course, museums are able to continue to attract visitors, and by using immersive applications, they would be able to contribute towards their income generation. And obviously, we know how much important, you know, this is for their survival, you know, in this era.
And there's a good question in the chat actually from Rosie Lee Power. Maybe we can't answer it directly, but give a sense of, you know, the importance of e-commerce. Do we have a sense of what kind of percentage?
Yeah, I think it's around 5 to 7%. Anna, am I right? I remember seeing that somewhere that.
So
I think
it's
7%. So the literature has pointed to 7% of museums' current sales from the traditional e-commerce of applications. And of course, when we refer to traditional, we tend to refer to sales that take place through the websites. And in fact, you know, through our research, we found that museums, yes, have been having that functionality, kind of the website, e-commerce or functionality, but the contribution of that to their overall income has been minimum. So what we want to find out is whether what Smartify has been proposing will provide further opportunities for income generation. I think, what we are finding so far, is a positive, and of course the COVID situation where tend to move more online, obviously there is a need for social distancing, social gatherings are now restricted. So we are going to see more of this online shopping using our own devices. So personal devices, smartphones and other personal devices will be used in this kind of shopping experience.
Anna, did you want to jump in there?
Yeah, just to kind of repeat what Niki said, but give a broader context. So the museum shop in general is usually a really important part of museum income. And for a large museum like the National Gallery, it generates about £7.5 million a year. But as Niki correctly said, the proportion of that shop money that's actually being earned through e-commerce is really small comparative to other sectors. So if you think about the larger like fashion and retail sector, so much is done online now, but the museum sector, that hasn't happened. And as Niki said, it's about 5 to 7%.
So, I mean, those are kind of some of the key drivers then really from a kind of museum's perspective about e-commerce. I want to bring in Philip Wu from the Royal Holloway Business School here to talk a little bit about, from the audience perspective, about what's attractive about the offer and how it might cut through. Philip, do you want to say a little bit from your perspective?
Sure. Yeah, I think some of the key points have already been covered by Anna and Niki. I think it's quite clear that the use of digital technologies to support the museum's revenue generation is very important at this time of global pandemic. Museums in the UK are losing most of the overseas visitors because of travel restrictions and lockdowns, and domestic visitors may also delay returning to museums, particularly those vulnerable groups. So I think on the one hand, we can be quite optimistic about the digital transformation and the e-commerce of the sector. Past research has shown that the audience's digital engagement with the cultural institutions has been on the rise even before the pandemic. So more and more people are browsing virtual collections or following museums' Twitter or Instagram accounts, and use mobile apps like Smartify to enrich their museum experience. But on the other hand, I think there are still lots of unknowns in terms of growing the e-commerce in the sector. So that's part of why we're doing this research together with Smartify and StoryFutures to find out. I think almost all museums have seen website visits and social media engagement going up. This does not necessarily mean that these visits are translating into retail sales. Again, the past survey studies and all kinds of research have consistently shown that the top reasons for visiting museum sites and using these technologies are planning a visit or finding out information about exhibition and collections. Shopping or buying gifts online is often ranked as one of the lowest, reasons for using the website. And secondly, people who embrace e-commerce in their everyday life are not necessarily the avid users of museum online shops. So in a recent study conducted by the Audience Agency UK and the National Gallery London, the researchers found that the museum audience's digital journey actually differs across different demographic segments. And with older adults over 60s, the most likely group to make an online purchase from museum shops. Whereas the tech-savvy, the young adults actually are less likely to do so. So this kind of leads to a final distinction I want to make. That is, shopping for cultural products is actually different from shopping for other commercial products. In business management literature and research, we often talk about the importance of customer engagement in driving sales. And it seems to me that the even deeper engagement with the cultural institution and having an immersive experience in seeing the exhibition or the art collection is particularly important for motivating the retail purchase in this museum sector. So I think in this sense, I believe the mobile technologies and the AR technologies that demoed by Anna hold lots of promises. And the past research again showed that the immersive technologies can provide sensory rich, stimulating, and personalized experiences that add lots of value to e-commerce environment. And I mean, there has been research on the use of VR and AR in museums, but we haven't seen much much done, in terms of focusing specifically on museum shops. So this is a very exciting area for us. And as Anna and Niki mentioned, we are currently doing this project together with a graduate fellow, and we'll see what we find out.
That's really interesting, particularly about the demographics who do and don't buy online, and perhaps speaks to a wider challenge, of the industry and cultural products of younger audiences expecting online to be free, and the shift that needs to be made in COVID times to kind of monetize that environment. And there's a number of questions kind of starting to come in on the chat about both the costs and the percentage of people buying. So maybe we talk a little bit around some of those questions by returning to Anna and thinking about a little bit about if these are the kind of like the context in which we're working, in which we're seeing online growth before COVID, but it's quite specific, and also we're seeing we're seeing the opportunity. What are some of the challenges of how to integrate e-commerce into an on-site as well as an online experience? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So the way we're looking at this is to try and make it as easy as possible and low cost as possible for museums to integrate with tours. As Philip was saying, the purchases that take place in museums are kind of passion purchases. It's influenced by being in this amazing experience, by learning about the art, and that's the moment when you think, oh, actually, I want to buy the book, or I want to learn more about this, or buy something to remember this moment. And so that's why we kind of had the idea, actually, why not include those kind of points to buy as you're taking that tour, as you're listening to the podcast or the audio guide at home. So the way it's going to work is actually a little bit like Instagram. If you've seen the Instagram shop, you're scrolling through, you see something you like, and you tap through and make the purchase actually back through on the main website site. So the only thing that we need to do then is pull the data through, the images, the context, and make sure that it's available in the kind of the best possible spots within the Smartify platform as people are taking those tours. I think the benefit there is unlike Instagram, which is obviously very cluttered. You're often going to see Michelle Obama, you're going to see Kim Kardashian, you're going to see LeBron James before you see National Gallery. The Smartify audience is there because they are interested in art, because they love learning about arts and culture, and so they're already listening to the tours. They're either on site or they're at home, and we feel like it's an extension of that educational journey, and that's why we feel that it's we can meet that challenge.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And there's a question in the chat that maybe you could speak maybe in broad terms about from Rosalie Power about the cost of adding merchandise to online tours. Is there a kind of ballpark percentage of that institutions need to be thinking about that you can talk about?
To creating a shop or for
I think to add in, yeah. So I think the question is probably if you've already got an online experience, an online shop, what's the cost of adding merchandise or for integrating merchandise that you're finding integrating merchandise into Smartify, for example?
Yeah, I mean, sure, I should say we're just doing this research now, so it's still kind of really fresh, and we're working with 3 museums, National Galleries of Scotland, National Gallery, and the Belvedere Palace in Vienna. So those are all quite large institutions that already have quite a advanced infrastructure for their shop. They're either on Shopify or kind of similar platforms. So in those cases where you have kind of good quality data, it's as simple as integrating this, your collection data on Smartify, which is very easy because it's usually done via an API or just a website scrape or something like that. So that's very, very low cost. And again, what we're trying to do is push the sales and all of that through to the museum platform rather than sort of building something complex and bespoke within Smartify.
Thanks, Anna. And then I want to bring, you might like to speak to from Diana in the chat about, the need to, how can we convince museums to update their digital presence and to think about e-commerce in their digital offering? What from the research that you've done, what are the kind of approaches that perhaps are successful in museums, that perhaps gain traction, or conversely that cause sticking points for them?
Sorry, is that me, James?
Yeah,
sorry, I didn't hear.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I suppose with any kind of sectors, when organizations are faced with challenges, and these challenges may affect, in fact, their own survival, then they are forced to take action. And in fact, recently, we've heard a lot about the impact of COVID on the cultural institutions, as well as on many other institutions and sectors. And we've seen, in fact, opportunities for digital transformation, even in sectors that they were very slow in engaging with, anything linked to digital. So to the question, what will force the museums to rethink their digital presence, I think the current situation is actually forcing the museums to rethink their digital sort of presence. And of course, this is not an easy endeavor. Museums need to carry out certain investments. Clearly, there's the proposed model, the e-commerce, the mobile commerce or Smartify, for example, that we are talking about today, has implications for museums. We talked about the benefits, but there are clearly other implications. There is a need, for example, for further technology investment. So there is another cost to be undertaken. There is a need for maintenance costs for museums. There is a need for good Wi-Fi connection to accommodate increased use by visitors. There is a need for implementing mobile payment options. Likewise, there's a need for investment in security applications. Every time you're engaging with mobile payments, there are security, trust or privacy security issues that your users will be facing. So they need to think of protecting their users' privacy, avoid security threats, threats associated with, e-commerce. Of course, it's not enough to think of e-commerce in terms of technology alone. It's also about rethinking business operations, how you do things. Business processes may need to be revisited. So introducing online shopping would potentially disrupt internal business processes in terms of customer service. There would be a need for changing how employees interact with visitors, as employees and visitors will not be sharing the same space. For example, they won't be meeting in the physical store anymore. Those interactions, those meetings would be taking place online. So training employees how to interact in this kind of different virtual space becomes important. So also external business process. Yeah, sorry, James.
No, and I guess this is a question to maybe yourself and Anna is, does this kind of work almost opens up a new can of worms for the sector in terms of logistics, like just-in-time delivery and just logistics for getting, moving from the digital to the physical, and that the e-commerce option is one part of consumer behavior that you're trying to kind of encourage, capitalize on, but then comes fulfillment, right? So I just wondered if there's anything at this stage from looking in the background and the experience that you're having about fulfillment and how the experience from the museum's point of view, trying to get people into e-commerce, then links into the delivery and fulfillment part of it. That's another piece to the puzzle, right?
Yes, exactly. And I think that's why the point I've made earlier is that we should not think of e-commerce simply in terms of technology. technology is just one piece of that puzzle. So there are other kind of wider organizational issues that need to be thought out. So the operations, the processes, perhaps those need to be changed, how the organization, how the museum interacts with the suppliers, but also, employees, how employees interact with visitors, but also employees training their own development, becomes important.
Anna, did you have any experience or thoughts on that logistics distribution question?
Well, we avoid that part of the puzzle, James. I mean, we're basically a marketing channel, I suppose. It's a marketing channel that's immersive, and it's while you're taking the tour, and that's what makes it engaging for people, and hopefully it kind of connects to that visitor experience and that passion purchase. So that's the part that we are looking at ourselves. We're also actually looking at kind of supply via Smartify. So we're looking at models around print on demand and, those kind of things where you can get by purchase directly. But the overwhelming feedback from our museum partners is that, they want to look after that piece of the puzzle because they already have those distribution channels rather than doing it directly through Smartify. So yeah, we're staying clear of that for now.
Very wise. Bennett, coming back to you, I just wonder, thinking about like visitor behaviour, what else we're seeing if we're seeing anything about people going back to galleries, and whether going back to the original introduction that Anna made about obviously as you go physically to the gallery, it's not as possible to go to the shop anymore. So how e-commerce fits into that? Are we seeing changes in visitor behaviour? In reduction in physical sales at galleries and museums across the country, or are we seeing, because as galleries open back up, are they doing the same kind of percentage of sales? Is there anything you're seeing in visitor behaviour?
Thanks, James. I mean, I think at this moment it's still difficult to say that how much reduction of the sales because of the COVID, and it's still early days. I haven't seen any research so far that actually measured the actual the impact of the COVID on the retail sales. But I think that's probably part of the research we can do together with Anna, with National Gallery. Now, so in terms of the post-COVID experience of visiting museums, I think no matter what technology we're going to use to help the museums to recover from the pandemic and to help boost the e-commerce sales, I think it is really important to think about a holistic experience for museum visitors, because museum visitors probably, many of you probably know, don't really think in terms of channels. They expect a single unified experience across all the channels and all the interactions with the museum throughout the journey, or even before the journey, from initial planning to the exit through the gift shop. So I think this is really important to think the gift shops, either physical or online, as an integral part of the experience during a visit. So a good design of the museum shops, whether it's physical or online, needs to support and expand this on-site and continued in the cultural experience and learning experience, rather than just act as purely as a souvenir shop after the visit. And I think it's a good design or a flexible interaction interface and selection of merchandises and a personalized experience, etc. Should really contribute to this intensification and extension of the core visitor experience.
Yeah, absolutely, and really useful. Thank you, Camilla at Art UK, for sharing some of that information that you've kind of experience that you've been having. Another question in the chat from Tyler about international travel. And one of the interesting things there, in terms of digital innovation and roadmaps, certainly working with the National Gallery, as StoryFutures does, that digital innovation roadmap will continue, and we're just starting a project with the National Gallery called StoryFutures China. That's about international trade and collaboration through digital innovation, and the Shanghai Museum of Science and Technology. about creating immersive experiences that play out in the two different countries. So, you know, I think pre-pandemic there's been a lot of investment and roadmaps set out by large cultural institutions in the UK towards digital innovation. And certainly in the UK, there is, you know, a lot of kind of like emphasis on that innovation roadmap, you know, continuing as a route out of, you know, the pandemic and cultural recovery. So I think for a large part, you know, that will continue, and as a country looking to some of the large and national organisations to lead in that space and work with innovative places like Smartify is really important. I'm really conscious of time. It's 11:30. I'll just invite any final thoughts from the panel before we wrap up. Niki, Anna,
there was quite a few questions, I think, in the chat channel. I think there's one question about the impact of AR, VR on museums, I believe.
Yeah, did you want to speak to that?
Yeah, so it was from Alice Britton, I think, asking, you know, what research has been done, has been carried out on the impact of the AR and the VR in museums. I'm sure, I mean, James, you probably is the expert here. But I just, you know, start off by saying that I have read quite a few articles about the use of VR and the AR in museum sector, and you know, there's some very surprising findings. So one of the findings from one article was that, you know, the implementation of VR or AR for in a particular museum would actually potentially you know, reduce the physical visit to the museum, because people are looking at art collections online instead of going to the museum itself. So I think there are lots of interesting questions still needs to be, you know, explored. To what extent we should design the VR experience to make it, you know, more valuable to visitors, not only online but also on site. So again, James, I think you have lots of experience in this area because you've been working with museums across the world on this.
Yeah, I mean, what I'd probably say is I'll put in the chat in a second. There's a good review from Nesta about cultural institutions' use of immersive technologies in the sector, and the practice is quite diverse, as you'd expect. I think the biggest challenge in bringing those technologies into the sector is about not disrupting already established business models and visitor flows. So a lot of careful planning about where these experiences sit within the current context of the museum or gallery offering, and the extent to which they're a bespoke experience or sort of in the wild, as it were, of the institution's main footfall. And those, I think, you know, almost like dividing the experiences into those two categories makes a big difference as to what the learnings are and what the market is. But there is certainly a market for it, both in terms of audience uptake. The Louvre exhibition of Leonardo, as well as the National Gallery's exhibition of Leonardo, has been largely successful pre-lockdown. But I'll put that in the chat just before we close. Niki, Anna, any nice to find you back on the internet, Anna. Any final thoughts that you want to add into the discussion?
Well, I'll just answer Rose's question on the chat just quickly. Smart works for 3D cultural items as well as art, so it's objects like the guitar I showed on the video at the beginning, and maybe you didn't catch on with that one, but so yeah, guitars, historical museums, anything like that really we work on. In terms of like kind of summarizing thoughts, I think we're with Smartify, you know, this e-commerce project is kind of trying to reinvigorate and add new kind of ways of existing business models, museum business models. So things like, you know, the shop is an obvious place to kind of add some digital innovation. But I think where the future is going and what I see museums are really interested in is looking at new business models now that actually look to the future of how museums can be sustainable beyond things like e-commerce. So thinking about how you broaden your membership program to be online and subscriptions based, how we can do virtual school trips. So these kind of digital business models, I think, are the next thing in terms of digital innovation in museums, rather than innovations that are focused specifically on the visitor experience. That will always be there, the visitor experience, and improving that, but I think we need to think of other digital business models as well.
Thanks, Anna. Niki, any final thoughts you want to end with?
Well, the question by Tyler on whether investments in digital innovation that we see at the moment are kind of reactive to the pandemic, and maybe we see a kind of stop to them. Definitely, if we looked at the experiences of many organizations in several sectors over the last 5-6 months, we take healthcare, for example, where this is a sector that normally resisted sort of digital innovation, any kind of change in the way they were sort of, providing consultations. We hear that teleconsultations will continue. It was something that came nearly overnight in the UK. The NHS here sort of liked it. They can see it as a way, forward. Maybe it won't be the predominance of way of consulting, I suppose, but it will stay. The same with home working. So again, many organizations resisted home working for a number of years, but now we hear more and more cases of organizations embracing home working, and therefore, even though it was forced upon employees and organizations, this is something that we'll see kind of, becoming more popular. So the same with the museum sector. I believe, yes, the pandemic is forcing organizations such as cultural institutions to engage with digital innovation, but we have to see this as an opportunity to do things differently. And I think in this panel we have explored that there are several opportunities, there are several benefits for organizations in these sectors that, and they are here to stay.
Yeah, welcome to the new normal, I guess.
Exactly.
So I'd just like to end by thanking our panelists, and I know a few people I'm sure will get in touch with Anna and the team directly with follow-ups. It's been a really lively chat. So also thank you to all the great questions from our audience. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
And look out for the launch of the eShop in November when it will go live.
Yes.
Of course, look out for the launch eShop in November. Thanks, Anna. All right.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Yeah,
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye.